Aloha and kumamai. I'm Lila Mower, president of Kokua Council, one of Hawaii's oldest advocacy organizations. Mahalo to my colleagues whose collaboration, to produce forums for the general public via Zoom kept Kokua Council active and productive despite the pandemic. We're among the first to produce public meetings via Zoom to discuss the effect of the pandemic on the most vulnerable of Hawaii's peoples and to question the government's efforts to mitigate the spread. We went as far as legal action to ensure that Hawaii's population was protected. We produced forums to introduce Hawaii to our candidates during the 2020 election season and later produced forums to recap the 2020 legislative session and recently produced a forum to review the 2021 Hawaii State Legislative Session. My valued colleagues on the board of Kokua Council participated in the vaccination rollout and kept Hawaii informed through our various resources. We also participated in assuring that those who were affected by isolation and food insecurity would not be ignored. I thank them from my heart for all their contributions to our community. In the near future, we may be able to go beyond Zoom and do Zoom hybrid meetings or meet in person. Our forum today is about housing, and we dedicate this forum to the late Reverend Bob Nakata, who was an advocate for affordable housing. While housing, its affordability, its availability may appear to be a multi-layered problem too difficult to resolve, there are many possible alternatives. In prior forums, Kokua Council learned that areas like Singapore and Vienna have been able to provide housing to most of their people. But it's highly doubtable that the majority of us here in Hawaii are willing to give up certain freedoms to accept more restrictive government laws. While increasing the use of the percentage of land use for housing from its current 5% by only 1% to 6% would increase lands available for residential use by a huge 20%, those who are interested in agriculture and self-sustainability warn that, as in our past, Hawaii's best agricultural lands will be converted to residential use. Today, we have an opportunity to learn about other alternatives which may help to alleviate Hawaii's housing shortage. Let's first hear from representatives of two well-known organizations, Connie Mitchell from the Institute of Human Services, then Jim Murphy from Habitat for Humanity, as to what their organizations have done and hope to achieve in Hawaii. Then we'll hear from Chuck Larsen of Hawaii Intergenerational Network regarding an innovative idea, home sharing, regarding home sharing, Each of our guest speakers will have up to 15 minutes, and after these three speakers have spoken, we'll open up to questions and answers and open discussion. Guests and other participants, please indicate when you have a question or comment, and our hosts, Rick Tabor and Doug Matsuoka, will call upon you. Okay, so let's start first with Connie Mitchell.
Lila. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share a little bit about what IHS has been doing relative to helping homeless people and those who are facing homelessness actually end their homelessness. As you all know, the only way we can end homelessness is for people to have housing. And today, I think I was asked to come and talk about housing first, but I really want to talk a little bit more broadly about the different types of housing, that is really necessary to help the population. For us, we serve people who are homeless. They may still be in their homes, but facing eviction. We also have programs that help people when they are on the street already homeless. We have outreach programs that actually deliver services to people who really have been very short homeless, like just a few days, sometimes all the way to people who have been very chronically homeless. And so we have special teams that go out to help people with mental illness or substance abuse who have been on the streets for years. And for those people, there's obviously a lot more that has to. But we also have a lot of emergency shelter. When I first started, 15 years ago, we just had the men's shelter and the women and family shelter. Since then, we've added the Sand Island Housing Navigation Program, which houses couples together and people with pets and other adults in converted shipping containers, and that's out at Sand Island. We also have we just opened our 5th medical respite house for people who are coming out of the hospital who need a place to go, who, because they're homeless, don't have a place to recover and need home care still. We also have a house that helps veterans, and we called the Kalihuka Recovery House, which is really for people who are making that transition into substance abuse treatment. And finally, you know, we also have been venturing out into providing transitional housing for people who are reentering from being in the public safety and, you know, coming out ex-offenders, and also dabbled in providing housing for youth as well. But in all of these cases, we've had to mainly lease, you know, master lease a place, and then, you know, bring people into the units for transitional. We really see ourselves wanting to get more into helping with permanent housing. The latest thing that we did was to partner with Hawiki Village, where we currently have about 120 in small and 2-bedroom homes. They are quite compact, you know, not your typical place, but they really are comfortable for these folks. And that is considered permanent housing. So today I just wanted to share with you, and I hope I can share my screen here. No, I guess I can't. Maybe I can. Can everybody see that?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Yes.
My start of it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the principles of housing first, which we've you know kind of applied to a lot of our different okay, I'm not sure how come I can't present this, but so let's go to this slide here. You know, I'm sorry you have to see the other stuff, but you know, basically there are a lot of different subpopulations of homeless people. And I think there's different types of housing that really is necessary to help transition people, and then also for permanent housing too. What we do at IHS is to specialize in assessment and triage. So we kind of looked at what does, you know, a person really need to be able to be stabilized in housing. So you can see that there's a lot of these different subpopulations that we work with. We have a relocation program for what I call tourists, you know, people who are visitors that have decided, oh my God, I came to the wrong place, it's too expensive here. We also have, going to the left, seniors that, you know, we've seen a lot of seniors become homeless, increasingly so in the last 10 years, I think. And then youth who are aging out of foster care or just running away. And then people who are just in crisis, who may have, as in the COVID case, you know, the COVID pandemic case, lost their jobs and then find themselves really without the resources to be able to maintain housing. And then there's people who are working but just make too little and really need a much more affordable type of housing. And then the three on the right, chronically homeless, a lot of times are medically fragile, substance abusers, and then mentally ill. And I think Housing First is really was originally designed to help those who are chronically mentally ill, chronically homeless, with some substance abuse as well. What we found is that many of the people here who are meth addicts also have a lot of medical issues. You know, so it's just a real challenge sometimes to just figure out, you know, what it is that somebody really needs. The first principle about Housing First is that we want to get them into housing as soon as possible. You know, and when a place like here in Hawaii, affordable housing is scarce or not so accessible sometimes, the shelter is really an option where we can use it for stabilization as well. And, you know, I have to say, we have brought people straight off the streets into housing, but some could really benefit from a period of stabilization, as you can imagine, you know, for medical treatment, detox, and initiation of psychiatric medication. The next principle is that we keep it low barrier. We don't tell them, oh, you can't come in because. It's more about, come on in and we'll see what we can do for you. And, you know, we just, when we're getting people into housing, we just tell them, you have to be able to abide by, you know, a lease and, you know, the expectations of the landlord in that sense. We're not saying you have to go to treatment right away, you know, but we really want, you know, to help you in engaging in that when you're ready, and we will keep at it usually to help. Housing is not considered a privilege, it's a right with, it is a right without, well, it's a right with responsibilities, I meant to say. Behaviors that violate a typical rental agreement will result in eviction, and a harm reduction approach is used. It's not meant to allow rampant drug or alcohol use, but it's really meant to say, hey, we really want to help you get healthier. Let's get into housing, because housing, when you think about it, provides safety and a healthy place for people to move forward. So, you know, and Housing First, the housing and the treatment services are provided separately, so that people who are helping them with case management and treatment are not the ones that are helping them move into housing or looking for housing. We always assume that people want housing, but they require supports to succeed. And I must say, for myself, in our experience, we have even housed opiate addicts and alcoholics and have been successful in Housing First. What we really have known and learned is that when people are addicted to methamphetamine or ice, it's been less successful, mainly because, you know, people who are on ice often will end up, you know, doing some criminal things and violating their lease anyway, and they cannot bring that stuff into their unit. So that in itself will cause a problem. The third principle is we always try to promote consumer choice and self-determination. People have to be able to live independently. And if there's too much nursing assistance required, then we really don't think they belong in Housing First or permanent supportive housing. And that's true for, you know, people, you know, to have a live-in caregiver. You can have one even if you have medical conditions or, you know, you have another psychiatric condition too. But we just really are careful about how people to help people towards success in this program. But I like to say that every homeless person or family, for everyone, there is a housing strategy that can be tailored to their need. It's not, you know, like, oh, certain people can be housed. We really believe that we can find the right type of housing and housing program for each person. Also wanted to just mention, which keep track of time here, that, you know, I belong to a group that's looking at housing for everyone. I just wanted to end with this slide to indicate that there is a housing continuum for us in homeless services. We're really looking at shelter, and then maybe some help into permanent or transitional housing. And the tiny homes is one that we really have been very interested in, because many people have started to think that that is a really good form of transitional in some ways for people who have been homeless for a long time, and maybe they don't feel comfortable being in an apartment unit right away. So these are some of the ones that we're working on, usually the people in the first 2 blocks on the top, and then also moving people into public housing or Section 8 or shallow subsidy programs and permanent supportive housing. I think the rest of them are, you know, really kuleana of the state in terms of coming up with more affordable rental housing, multifamily units, and working with Department of Hawaiian Homelands as well. I think some of you folks are more familiar with that. So, you know, I believe in us building for every level of, you know, need in order for everyone to have housing. Thank you very much. Lila, you
You're
want to
muted,
unmute?
Lila.
Lila, you need to unmute.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you very much for your presentation. Please wait, because we're going to go into questions and answers. Jim Murphy, Habitat for Humanity, you're next, please.
Great, thank you. I am also going to try and share my screen. So let's. Can you see the drawing?
That's beautiful. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Very
I did not draw this. So first of all, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. I'm actually it's significant that I'm here with Connie too, because we're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, which I'll get to in a second. So a little bit about Habitat. Habitat obviously is a very large national organization. There's 1,400 affiliates nationwide. There's actually 5 here on island, or 5 here in the state. There's 1 on Maui, 1 on Big Island, 1 on Kauai. There's 2 here in on Oahu. There's us and Leeward. Kunia Road's kind of the dividing line between the 2 of us. And essentially what that means is our service area is from Cunha Road over. We build houses on this side of the island, which is primarily Waimanalo, Papakolea, Kaneohe, Waipahu, North Shore. And so the way our program works is, and I'll sort of take you through this is called our pathway to homeownership. When families come to us, they are coming to us looking for permanent housing that they will own. There is a mortgage tied to their housing or to their home. There's a responsibility and participation for that. And so their qualifying requirements are that they have to have a housing need. They have to be financially stable because they do have to repay the 0% mortgage that's tied to their home. And then they also have to be willing to partner. They have to come out and be willing to come out, work with us and our volunteers on the construction of the home, and participate in our program in other ways. It's not a typo, but we did have an update to what you're looking at here as far as where to start. Families do either need to own their own land, or there has to be a land lease through. A lot of times it's DHHL, but one of the edits to this is that we're starting to work with the state. They're identifying parcels of land that they're allocating to us, and then we can go find families who are not on a list from DHHL, may not necessarily be Native Hawaiian, to be able to find opportunities for them to build a home with us as well. So the family applies through our program, and they are treated just like any other mortgage lender. They go through a financial survey. We assess their ability to afford whatever home we build for them. We build to size. So if there's a family of say a mother, father, 2 kids, a boy and a girl, they would qualify for a 3-bedroom house. Mother, father, and one child would qualify for a 2-bedroom house. So we build specifically to the size at the time that they are applying. We do some assessment of their current living situation, get to know the family a little bit better, and then our group actually packages up their application and takes it to the board. And then our board of directors approves every family as qualifying for our program. Then that's when I get to work, because now I've got to find the money to build that house, either through grants, either through our own fundraising. We work with a lot of third-party organizations like DHHL, USDA. We're getting ready to do our first Veterans Administration VA loan project as well. And then we start to develop the project. We go in for permit. We work with the family on, specifically what, color paint they want, what, flooring choices do they want, what cabinets choices do they have. This is, for a lot of our families, it's the first chance that they'll ever have to be able to make those kinds of decisions about their home, because a lot of them, for the most part, are either living in expensive rental units or living with family in an overcrowded unit. So they are one medical bill, one job loss, one argument with families away from being in a much more dire situation. So then once we get through the process of developing the home that we're going to build, we go in through permit. We stand in the same line that everybody does, waiting for permits. But once we get through that process, then we have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers from the community who are more than eager to come out and help work with us and the families to build these homes. The construction of the home is actually the shortest part of this process, because once we get to that point, the construction of the home really only takes about 5 months. We've got construction staff here in-house, and then we work with, as I mentioned, just a ton of volunteers. Some of them skilled labor. We get, contractors who like to come out and work with us. We get get bankers, we get real estate agents. We're very blessed to get a lot of support from military who want to come out. And it's an amazing mission to see in action, because essentially you are building a house that's going to stand for a very long time, and you're doing it right alongside the family that's going to be living there. So we are really and truly creating a community as we are building these houses. And then when the process is done, when we're done, we have a huge dedication ceremony. We hand over the key to the house, to the family, and then we actually service the mortgage. So when the family is making their mortgage payments, they're making them to us. And we do that largely because it keeps us connected. We you know, as I'm sure a lot of people did during 2020, during COVID, had families who got into a situation that they didn't expect to. Maybe they lost a job. Maybe they needed some assistance. We are much more forgiving than most banks when it comes to mortgages. So we want to make sure that we are not only building safe and affordable housing for families, but we're also keeping them in that housing. So we're really the only organization on this island that does all of that, from servicing or from you know, developing and providing the loan, to building and designing the house, to managing the mortgage as well. So we're kind of an all-in-one shop here, which is the Habitat model. The reason I thought it was interesting that both Connie and I were on this call together is we are on opposite ends of the spectrum. She's working with the homeless population, and we're looking at affordable home ownership. And affordable home ownership has an enormous amount of benefits to the community where the family is going to be living. But there's so much in between our two organizations. Everything, and one of Connie's graphs sort of laid that out, but everything from affordable rental to, you know, there's teachers housing, there's ag housing, there's transient housing, there's, you know, rent to own options out there. And it's all kind of disconnected. And it shouldn't be. If affordable housing, if the solution is going to be resolved, there's going to need to be some connection between all of these organizations that provide it, all of the city and county, state organizations that support it, and even the funding as well. So we're very happy to have been invited to participate in this conversation, because it's a step in the right direction. There should be more conversations like this with providers of more diverse housing solutions to sit around the table and try and come up with ways to work together. So that is my spiel. I will stop sharing my screen and I will mute myself.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was very informative. So somewhere between Jim and Connie, here's Chuck Larsen with Hawaii Intergenerational Network talking to us about home sharing. Jim, are you, not Jim, excuse me. Chuck, are you ready? Chuck, you probably need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. Want me to start?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, well, I'm Chuck Larsen. I'm the director of the Hawaii Intergenerational Network. And that's a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1995. In 2007 and again in 2017, our nonprofit was doing long-range planning. And in both instances, we decided that the most important issue for us would be affordable housing for seniors. And as we got into it, it's more than just affordable housing that's the issue. It's also a health issue. Affordable housing in Hawaii continues to be a top priority for all lawmakers. In supporting affordable housing, we have seen amazing expenditures of government money to develop new housing. In addressing the lack of affordability housing, his project will support the need without building any new housing or ongoing rental subsidies. The project is called Home Sharing Hawaii. Home sharing is actually a real simple idea. It's basically bringing two people together, two types of people. And there are people who own their own homes and are usually living in isolation, and those people are looking at an affordable place to live. And the HIN process has developed a mechanism for doing this that is based on a program called Home Sharing on the mainland, where being practiced by 37 different cities. So while this is a new project to Hawaii, we haven't invented anything. They've had all the forums and they've given us all the support. We need to understand what the obstacles to reaching people to bring them together and all the other kinds of information that you need. It's a real detailed booklet. And it's kind of been our Bible as we go along. It's called the Resource Guide for Establishing New Home Sharing Programs. It's basically in Vermont, but we've been developing our programs in partnership with many of the cities of the 37 cities on the mainland. We work closely with a program in Oregon and Portland and another one in San Mateo, and also Pittsburgh. So we're getting a lot of support. And one of the things that we've found out that whilst home sharing is a simple idea, it's one that's very difficult to operate. What we're trying to do is bring more people to share a home to their mutual benefit. The home can be an apartment, a condominium, a traditional single-family house, or a combination of the two. Every home sharing arrangement is unique. It depends on the needs, the time, and the interests and abilities of the people involved. It differs from typical roommate situations because at its core, it is about two people helping each other. There's usually a written agreement outlining the expectations of both parties. A nonprofit home sharing program such as HIN, such as the Home Sharing Hawaii program, generally provides a screening and matching service. Once a home share match has been made, the program provides ongoing support to the match. There are about 11 steps that we have to go through before we match somebody to a successful sharing of a home. And it starts with them filling out an application, and then we doing a criminal history check on both the home seeker and the homeowner. After the clearance is made, then we have them do a personal preference kind of form that tells whether they would like to, maybe as an older woman living by herself. And typically, the owner is an older female whose husband has passed away and she's occupying the home by herself. She doesn't get a roommate because, well, oftentimes she's just afraid of being abused or swindled. And as a result, her home is typically falling apart also. So what we do is we bring them together through a matching process. It's sort of like a dating application, so that we can have some basis to make sure that this is going to be a good arrangement for them. And then after a few more steps, we have them meet personally. And then if it's still something they want to go through with, then we have what we call a camping trip, where the home seeker goes and stays for 2 weeks with the homeowner. And then if it continues to be a harmonious relationship, then we will provide ongoing support after that. We work with mediation of the Pacific to see if there's any problems that they can use help with from a third party. One thing, while affordable housing is the main subject of this presentation, a bigger issue is health. And it has to do with people living in isolation and the dangers of isolation. Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General for Barack Obama, is now the Surgeon General for President Biden. But the COVID crisis was on the horizon. Surgeon General Murthy was saying that isolation was the biggest health issue in our country. And isolation was more of a problem than diabetes, obesity, heart disease, all lumped together. Isolation was something that we needed to pay more attention to. So this project also is helping resolve the issue of isolation. There are 26,000 people living in isolation, or at least living by themselves. And we shouldn't call it isolation, on Oahu. So it's a huge amount of people. In our first 2 years of operation, we've mostly been setting up our procedures. And we did have one match we made back in December of 2019, but the COVID crisis came right after that. And, it just brought us to a screeching halt as far as being able to meet in person with people and visiting their own homes. I need to also mention that our program got a boost from the HMSA Foundation. Actually, we were not focused on much of anything until they brought it to our attention that isolation was an important facet of our health that we needed to pay attention to. So they gave us a planning grant, which got us off the ground. And right after that, the Kaiser Foundation gave us a very generous grant. And then Hawaii Community Foundation provided enough money so we were able to hire 3 people as consultants. And basically that's our staff, 3 part-time people. Unfortunately, because of the COVID crisis, we're really deficient as far as doing outreach. I used to speak to Rotary clubs probably twice a month, and anybody else who would have us come together. And for that reason, I'm really happy to be part of this presentation today. One of the most difficult parts of home sharing is finding people who are willing to share their home. As you can imagine, I think everybody here knows of an auntie or some relative who has been living by themselves for a long time. And basically, as I mentioned to you before, they're afraid. And basically what we try to do is remove that fear factor. And in the process of them making an application for a match, the first step is we have a criminal history clearance on both the home seeker and the homeowner. As I say, we think the biggest problem is just they need to feel safe to do this. Well, these home sharing programs on the mainland have been going for at least 40 years. So they condition us to have modest expectations at the beginning, which we feel we're still in the pilot phase, and expecting too great an outcomes of our program. So with that, we're going to try and find more ways of increasing our inventory of homeowners. That's the biggest issue. In this program, that there's probably 7 times as many home seekers. That means people who are looking for an affordable place to live and a homeowner. About 15 minutes before I went online here, I got a call from a woman living in Waianae who was being evicted from her home because they were going to develop the property she's in. All the tenants there were being evicted. And she told me that she called every other source of senior housing support, and there was usually there was nobody at the end of the line to take her call. And they said they would get back to her, or else she found out that there was a 3 or 4 month wait for any type of affordable housing, even for seniors. So it's a really big issue, and I think that our program, Home Sharing Hawaii, has significant implications for dealing with population is the fastest growing aging population and probably one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. We have a great board of directors, and everybody's stepped at the table to volunteer to do outreach, but that's where we need the most help. So I'm hoping that you other people who are in the room watching this this meeting will be able to, excuse me, forgot to turn that off. But we really need help, both with financial support so we can hire qualified staff, because it is very labor intensive, and also with people to connect to our inventory of the most difficult part. I think I've explained it pretty much. I could go into detail on more stuff, but that's basically it.
All right, thank you very much, Chuck. Rick, you had a question. Let's start with our question and answers. Rick Tabor.
Okay, thank you everybody for presenting. It was very, very helpful to hear each of your presentations, so I appreciate that very much. So, of course, Kokua Council, we primarily are focused on seniors. So I wrote in the chat box just a little bit ago, let's talk about seniors and their housing. Chuck, you did that a little bit. Connie, you referred to it a little bit. But we're currently facing probably one of the nation's biggest eviction history in our history here. So mitigating, and what plans do we have to kind of avoid this train wreck that we keep kind of moving towards? The deadline keeps getting extended and different things keep coming up, but what are your programs? What are you thinking as far as what we're facing? And a bigger question, and Connie, I asked this of you some time ago, but kind of what is the percentage of seniors that are out there that are homeless? Do we know? And then, yeah, go from there.
So I'll start with, just the percentage of seniors. It seems like that amount has been growing, and I would say it hovers around, it's going up. I'm just saying that,
You're breaking up. What's the percentage? Yeah, sorry.
18 to 20%. If you talk about, well, we look at it as people on the street, like even 50 and up, being seniors already, and that has increased, doubled in the last 10 years. And I hear many stories, like Chuck was talking about, people's homes are being sold off, especially in this hot real estate market, or like when away, they've been living with their parent, and then they pass away, and the rest of the family wants to sell the house because they want to be able to divide it up among all the children, and then the person has nowhere to go, and we see them here at IHS sometimes. So I think realizing that, I wanted to shift and pivot back to the question you had about the upcoming lifting of the moratorium eviction. There have been a lot of programs that are trying to mitigate that. And of course, a lot of them have to do with COVID, and a lot of the seniors, they're not in that situation. They're really in situations where their incomes have not kept up with the rising cost of housing. And in those particular cases, what we really need are the shallow subsidy programs, where the government actually has the Hawaii Public Housing Authority issued vouchers where people, they help with a small amount to mitigate the rising costs. So like maybe they would pay $300, of a person's rent. So if, somebody experiences a little hike, it really is something that they can afford. And it's a lot less than paying, like say, a voucher where they're paying 70% of the person's rent, which is a Section 8 voucher. So I think, there are some different programs. If you are affected by COVID, like you were working and you lost your job somewhere along the line in the past year, I would suggest that you go to oneoahu.org. It's the city's program, and to just sign up, even though it may not be open right this minute. You have an opportunity to, I think ask that somebody call back, or you find out when they'll let you know when it opens up again. But there is so much money from the federal government right now to help mitigate, some of these evictions. And if people are willing to work with their landlord and work with, a housing provider, they can definitely get that kind of support, just catch up on rent. Because if people are like several months behind, they can still catch up.
Thank you,
And if I could add to that, one of the things that we're trying to do is to get folks to avoid homelessness. So we have a number of seniors who are in homes that they've probably raised their family in. Maybe their family's moved on, but those homes have not been taken care of over the years. And so we have a home maintenance program where we go in and make repairs to homes. Unfortunately, a lot of times we get to them too late. So by the time they come to us, it's really more cost effective to tear the home down and build a new one. But we're trying to roll this out, or we're rolling this out and trying to get it as many people to know about it as possible. Because if we can go in there and make changes, whether it's getting the home ADA compliant, or fixing some flooring, or even just making it look better, then seniors can stay in their home, stay in their community, and it vastly improves their well-being and outlook as well.
I'm also thinking, Jim, that you might partner with Chuck, because he might have some people who have homes that they need help in order for them to be able to rent it out, because they'd have a home but not in good condition, like what Chuck was saying.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a real quick question for you, Jim. The government, and I don't know if it was city and county or state, allowed ADU housing or OHA housing, or like a second house on an existing dwelling, whatever. Do you participate with that? Does Habitat for Humanity participate in that kind of thing too?
We could. It is, Habitat has very strict rules. We could do it as long as you are creating that ADU or Ohana unit as an extension of your own home. You couldn't do it if you were looking for a revenue stream to rent out, but it is possible. I know that DHHL is not in love with the idea of ADUs, but that is something that we could do.
All right, thank you. Doug, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question for everyone. Let me just introduce myself a little bit. I'm Doug Matsuoka. I'm a volunteer director here at Kokua Council. I'm the IT guy at Hawaii Meals on Wheels that serves mostly seniors. I'm an authentic senior myself, and I also participate in Food Not Bombs, which feeds the hungry. Our organization feeds the hungry at Thomas Square. We've been there for 10 years. And I've been involved in kind of homeless issues for a while. In 2014, I became homeless myself, and I wasn't mentally ill, not a substance abuser. I'm not blameless. It's a matter of arithmetic. I could have figured out that I didn't have enough money. But that's so I was homeless for a little while, and I noticed I was in good company, because there are a lot of people who are like me. There's a homeless attorney that was living in his van and that sort of thing. I also ran into a lot of seniors who qualified for subsidized housing, but they were just waiting for that space to open up. So they were on the street for a couple years, and then they'd finally get a space. My question is there any form of housing that will help give them, that will shelter them during that interim while they're waiting for a space to open up? And I'd like to say I'm asking for a friend, but actually, this might be an alternative for myself too. Once I stop working, I don't have enough to pay market. So I open that up to anyone here.
Well, that's one thing, Doug, that we actually, this latest house that we acquired, required, for our medical respite house. The downstairs we're using for medical respite, but the upstairs we were planning to use it for people who needed that interim, time before they're actually, able to access some other kind of housing. So in fact, we're opening, just this week, and we have this lady who is having to leave her home in Mililani, and we're taking her in, and she's going to live in the upstairs part. She doesn't need medical respite. She needs a place to just hang her hat before she's able to access like another voucher. So there are such units, and we invite people to call us. Our housing department is separate from our shelter, and they can help with homeless prevention or what we call rapid rehousing.
Anyone else have a alternative kind of situation?
I think Gary had a question. Gary, are you there?
Thank you, Lila, and thank you to the presenters. My question is for Connie. Connie, of the homeless populations, which are the largest and which populations overlap the most? Thank
In
you.
terms of the subpopulations that I
Yes, correct.
probably families with children constitute a larger percentage just because they're bigger. Yeah, they're like many people in one household, but they account for more people. And but it's a balance. It's like it changes every once in a while, but we're trying to, you don't see the families as much because they're not usually on the street. We usually try to get them off the street as much, quickly as possible because of the children. But, it's really tragic how many families are actually homeless. They're not on any lease. They're often doubled up, with their other family members or friends. And that's where I wish Habitat for Humanity could build a whole lot more houses for these folks, because they're working, a lot of times, and, they really just don't make enough money. So employment is another big part of what we do. We really are interested in helping people earn more income, so that they can afford, to do something like build a house.
Which of the subpopulations overlap the most?
In terms of, it's hard to say, Gary. And the reason I'm thinking about it, I think, okay, among the people who are, substance users, all ages, I cannot believe, how many, have been using for a long time, that they've aged, and they have aged into being a senior sometimes also. Similarly, veterans, of all ages as well, although the VA has a lot of resources, so it really helps a lot of our veterans. I think that the group of people that I worry about are people who are young people who are homeless. Many of them have actually been homeless as a child. And that's why I'm so passionate about, getting homeless families off the street and really into stable housing. Because if you have experienced homelessness as a child, then you have a much higher likelihood of experiencing it as an adult than the average person.
I get that. It becomes sadly a way of life, and nothing else. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Connie. That's helpful.
Hi, so recently there was something in the news and I just glanced at it, and I apologize, I didn't read it well at all, but it was regarding a church that was offering not tiny houses, but I think they were storage sheds as shelter. And I don't know what the public's response to that is, but to me, shelter is more important than quote unquote a regular house. For people on the streets, it's a place to leave their things so that if they can work, they can leave their things safely, go to work, have a place to sleep. But anyway, what alternatives have each of you looked at besides what you do? So Connie, besides providing for those who are homeless or in transition, Jim, instead of providing just for people who already have access to land and just need to build a structure, Chuck, again, you know, you're into home sharing, so you're dealing with people with dwellings to share and people who might be able to match. What alternatives have you looked at, please? Thank you.
So I would, our program is, it's not just for people who have land, or people who have a land lease with DHHL. We're making some headway with the city and state because there are a lot of parcels of land out there that could be developed. We've got 3 that are under development right now for single family homes, and then there's a few out in IAEA that we're looking at. So that can start to open up opportunities for folks who don't have a land lease from DHHL or land of their own, and a lot of folks, unfortunately, who have that land lease from DHHL have the land lease not because they put their name on the list, but because their parents put their name on the list, and their parents have passed it on to them. That's just how long they've been on the list. We've looked at a number of different options. We're one of the things we're getting ready to introduce our strategic plan for the next 5 years. And one of the things that we're looking at is developing an 8-unit condominium building, which makes better use of square footage on property and gets more people in homes, because not everybody wants to maintain a yard. Not everybody wants to, especially with Kupuna, who may just need a space and the support system of being around a community. We've also looked at containers. We've also looked at, I had a conversation several years ago with G70 about the development of some buses and converting those into housing as well. One of our biggest challenges is when we are building a house. For example, we're probably going to dedicate a new home to someone probably by the end of this week or maybe next week, but we had to tear his house down because it was so dilapidated, and he and his children a single dad needed to move somewhere else. And so we're really displacing some people for a period of time. We try and reduce that as much as possible, but there's a financial burden for these folks to try to find a place to stay. So one of the things that we're trying to develop is the house that we can use to put families in on a temporary basis while their house is being built, and then move another family into it. Those are just a few things.
So some other things that we've looked at, and I've been trying to talk to legislators about too, is something called public assisted living, because for assisted living facilities, you really have to have money, and many people sell their homes, in order to enter one of those. And so we know that there's a lot of people who are also in that situation where, as you guys have mentioned before, they don't want to live alone, but they don't really they still want to have their own privacy, but they need support. And so I think public assisted living is something that we really do need to be considering for the future, because there are a lot of people who may be, later on experiencing some cognitive impairment, just slowly, but, just really needing somebody to check up on them every once in a while. So that might be an option. And then I mentioned before, the tiny home, Kauhale Village, it's similar in that people would have their own space, but then they share maybe a communal kitchen and a communal lounging area and the hygiene facilities. I remember going to New Zealand and actually traveling there, visiting some of these, different parks, that welcomed camper vans, that really allowed people to just move around. But for some of them, they were living there, and it was a real economical way for them to live. And finally, there's a thing called a capsule hotel that they have in Japan, where it's very small places, for people to just really, have a bedroom pretty much, but, they share the other facilities and stuff, but it's a way to bridge your time between more permanent housing. And, I think for a lot of people who experience homelessness transitionally very shortly, that might be a good option for them as well.
Thank you very much. Chuck, is there anything that you want to add? If not,
Chuck.
John, oh,
I was just gonna say, I don't see Chuck anymore on here.
okay, all right.
Sorry.
John McDermott, Hawaii's ombudsman. Welcome, John. I understand you have a couple of questions.
Two questions. First question is, I was just wondering with the three speakers if they have partnered with the Office on Aging or the county offices on aging, yes or no, and what do you think you could do better with that kind of partnership? And then the second question was, because it sounds like you also all could use some more staff, have you considered MSW practicum students? Because my program used practicum students, they were very good, and of course they were free. And to do that, you just need an MSW to supervisor and meet with the students once a week. And that supervisor does not have to work at the agency. So you could use somebody like me who has an MSW as the supervisor in order to get the students.
So to answer your question, John, we definitely do have students working with us, and we, could really probably use more, like you said. And we have partnered with the Office on Aging. They actually are providing training for us, my staff, in learning to recognize dementia. So they provided us dementia training. They also, have really directed us towards some resources that help people who are needing more help, to live independently as well. So that's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, and we also are connected to the Office on Aging. As I mentioned earlier, one of our biggest challenges, they may refer somebody over to us who needs some repairs to their home, but if you've ever done a renovation to any place that you've lived, you know that the minute you start to do one thing, you've got to do another. And then all of a sudden you've got to update electrical, and it gets really expensive sometimes. And we certainly want to try and not, because we're not one of those contractors that likes to keep adding to the cost of what we're doing. And then at some point you reach a point where it's just too expensive for even the repairs. You got to do a bunch of stuff. So it's catching it early. That's key. And we definitely work with the Office of Aging for that. Where we need help is, we do need assistance with our family services, where we're bringing families into our program and sort of not only, getting them to financially adjust to being a part of our program, but to also socially adjust to being a part of our program. And then what we really need are people to build houses with. So it's, like I mentioned, we get a ton of novice volunteers who want to come out, but it's those general contractors and trade associations and folks like that who really know how to use the hammer and saw to get them to come out, because it reduces our price considerably, and it also gets the family into the house a lot sooner.
Thank you.
Our next question, or actually statement, comes from Dale. And Dale, if you'd like to, I would preface it with, I have real concerns about property taxes kind of going up so high eventually that seniors just can't afford it. And I think, Connie, you kind of mentioned that earlier a little bit, but Dale, why don't you go ahead with your question? It kind of segues off of that. Are you there, Dale?
You have to unmute.
I guess while we're waiting.
Hello.
Oh, there you go.
Dale just walked out of the room, so
okay.
He can't ask the question. I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and read it. So he said we need a link or cap on monthly fees, increases in rents and fees, and I'm throwing in property taxes and housing to achieve affordability. Presently, none of our politicians seem to support that. What's your experience with that? Are we moving in that direction? Do you have any experience with that in your work?
I think the the cap on property taxes, actually, I think we have a fairly strong program, for people who are seniors to register and get a tax break. And that's really helpful for those who are aging. And I think you get one when you're 60, and then when you're 70, and when you're 80. I think that, we really need to look more at those. I'm not sure who right now is being priced out, in that sense, unless you live like maybe in Kahala or something, which is very possible. But I think right now all over, everything is going up, but that's something that I don't doubt that maybe the city might be open to. This administration has been very supportive of trying to find ways, to help people not get priced out and, not become homeless. And so that definitely is something I think maybe there's some political will for that.
Do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recognize there needs to be some consideration as in terms of the increases that are there, because we're just, and I don't even know if I can knock on wood say this, coming out of COVID. People are going back to work. People, the economy is starting to gain some speed again, and tourism, at least based on the traffic that I have to and from work, is back. And we're getting back to being a healthier, vibrant society. But we've got to make up for some time. And I think by raising, continuing to raise rents while people are still trying to catch up financially, it's going to cause more problems. I mentioned earlier that one of the biggest issues that our families have they are living in a situation where a job loss or a medical bill or something is going to make them have to choose to leave a rental situation. We built a house a few years ago for a family that was 10 members of the household, but they were all three living in different places on island. And, they had grandkids. And so it was really hard for the family to stay connected. But now they're all under one roof, and the grandma and grandpa can be, babysitters when the kids are going to school and things like that. So, but if their rent got to the point that it was so high, who knows what they would have done.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. So I'm Rick Tabor, and I'm a vice president here at Kokua Council, and many other things. But my background, as Connie, as you know, is mental health. And for a long time, so I was in Seattle for many, many years. It's a similar situation there as it is here. So we see the mentally ill on the streets, and that actually triggers a lot of response or a lot of reaction from the public. And in research for an article I did for Generations magazine, I discovered here in Hawaii, only 37% of our mentally ill are getting treatment. So what can we do? Well, I don't know, Connie, you guys have done a lot of stuff around the mental health issue on the street, but what can we do, and how do, just helping the mentally ill get treatment is my big question. But then secondly, just working around the stigma of homelessness, because I've known for years that families are the main, that's the largest portion, but people don't see the families, they see the mentally ill. So just, what are you guys doing around that, and what have you done? And I know this whole lifetime that, Connie, you've spent on this. So please, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. If you don't know, I'm actually a psychiatric clinical nurse specialist by training. And so mental health has been a really big passion of mine in terms of helping people who are homeless. And right now we have outreach that's dedicated specifically to helping people who have mental illness and, co-occurring substance use, usually if you're on the street. We have outreach that goes out with a doctor, a psychiatrist, that can help assess people and evaluate for treatment. We use a lot of long-acting injectable medications and antipsychotics that really helps people for a long time. Once we get the loading doses in, another injection can be good for 1 to 3 months at a time sometimes. So it really makes a difference when we can stabilize people. and of course, get them into housing. And so really, we're doing as much as we can to get them treated so that we can get them prepared for housing. We are actually having, we have a program that actually does do legal petitions, to help people get court-ordered treatment in some instances when they really have lost their, intellectual faculties to the point where they're making very poor decisions or no decision. They're just like on the street, doing nothing to help themselves and deteriorating to the point that they have to enter the hospital sometimes, which is very, very sad. So, I think there's more to come. We recently changed the law in this last legislative session so that we didn't have to face the public defender kind of saying, oh, the person says they don't want to take medication, so they're defending them to the utmost, which is their job, but it made our job very, very difficult. I think we hope that, removing the public defenders from the process and having a public, a guardian ad litem, actually appointed for the person instead, right away would be a quick way to get them some treatment. But I do think we have to relook at some of our mental health laws here that preclude people from actually getting the treatment that they need and they deserve. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. Jim, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, my background before I got into housing was healthcare. And I used to work in community health centers in Chicago for a number of years. And so the connection between housing and healthcare and mental health is very obvious. But I think it's very comforting to know that there are organizations like Connie's that are not necessarily, providing a shelter, but a more comprehensive approach to what, somebody needs while they're there, so that they can get themselves into a place where they might be able to take a next step. There's too many programs that are so siloed where it's just about like getting somebody inside of an apartment. Well, that doesn't solve the problems. That doesn't feed them. It doesn't heal them. It doesn't give them opportunities to improve their lives by getting, employment training or things like that. So that's why I'm a big fan of Connie Mitchell.
Yeah,
Rick, I just wanted to add, earlier we were talking about loneliness, and the isolation that people experience. And, even for some of the people that we house, if you've been on the street for years and years and years, and then you go into like a unit, it's really lonely for people, because even as horrible as it is on the street for some people, they have friends, they feel, and, they really are lost, not knowing what they're going to do with their lives. And so part of permanent supportive housing is really helping to promote people's connectedness with others so that they have real friends that they can do other things besides doing drugs with and stuff. But, really mental health begins with connectivity with other people. And I think we all can do a better job, of reaching out to people and, not judging people and just really opening doors for people to be in your community, whether it's a faith community, a church, or, whether it's in, an activity. Like we had people join like a running group, or something, but it just helps to know that, you can be with other people and they're not just going to think of you as a homeless person pretty much. So I think, as we in Hawaii look at our spirit of aloha, I hope that can be revived, to a degree in some ways to really include more people.
Yeah, I think any kind of hui is helpful for people. I mean, homeless or not.
I have a question, and to both Jim and Connie, and you might not be able to answer it because it's kind of a hot question, and you have to deal with both the city and state. But out on the street, the solution seems so obvious, and that is rent control and then control of the sale of speculative real estate. Do you have either a organizational or even personal opinion about how helpful these would be, or if you would support it if someone introduced either an ordinance or a bill on it?
I think, the rent control bills are, they have to be well thought out because there's a lot of repercussions when you do that. But I do think that, we need to have something that does stop the rents from going out of control. This is ridiculous what it is now. And I think international, because Hawaii is an international market, it's been even more subject to that kind of predatory buying almost, of the real estate. And then it makes it difficult for people like Jim to help people build, because the property values go up so much that, it's just so hard. And so I do think that if we're really going to commit to, people who have lived all their lives here, having a place to live, we have to figure that out, and just really try to mitigate some of this, uncontrolled escalation.
Oh, thanks for coming out and being clear. Thanks. Jim?
I think, and I'm just going to warn you all right now, I'm about to get on a soapbox. But, if you look at like some of the high rises that are being built in Kaka'ako and elsewhere, and there's a component of those high rises that they're calling affordable housing, whether they're renting to or whether they're affordable home ownership, it's not genuinely affordable. It's not conducive to what families need, especially growing families need. But they are able to do that because they've got really good attorneys that can, get things approved, and they get consideration. They either get funding or they get tax relief or other kinds of funding towards being able to do that. And that takes a lot of money away from organizations like Connie's and others that are addressing, affordable rental or homelessness, or transient housing or teacher housing or ag housing and all that sort of stuff. Buildings that are built like that have affordable housing are not really part of the solution.
So you would favor some kind of rent control, legal control, or also controls on speculative real estate investment?
I think definitely with real estate investment, I think it needs to be a much broader conversation, and a conversation that needs to be to have a lot of different voices in. Rent control is tough because, if I'm a landlord and I own a building, I want to rent it and make as much money as I can. And the problem is, there are enough people my wife and I moved here from Chicago 8 years ago, and I was shocked when we came here. We had a condo in Chicago and we sold it, and we became renters for the first time for our first couple of years. And I was shocked when you go to rent a place that it was almost like a bidding war. And I just wanted to rent an apartment. And so I think, landlords, there's enough people out there that will pay the highest price that they're not really incentivized to not jack rates up.
Thank you.
Hi, Doug. Thank you. We have Kevin Carney. Kevin would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you for the opportunity. I clicked on attending this because I saw that the title was radical housing, and I wasn't sure what that meant, so I wanted to learn a little bit more. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Kevin Carney, Vice President for EAH Housing in Hawaii, and I see a couple of familiar faces. I know Connie, I know Jim, aloha. And EAH stands for Ecumenical Association for Housing. We abbreviated years ago because we got tired of spelling ecumenical for people and telling them what it meant. But we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're celebrating 53 years of operation, formed in Marin County in Northern California, one of the most expensive counties in the nation, way back in 1968, shortly after the death of Martin Luther King, with the purpose of creating social justice, particularly in housing. So we develop low-income rentals, and we've never sold a property in our 53-year history. And the main financing source for what we do is the low-income housing tax credit program, which was created by Congress back in 1986. And it's actually a portion of the Internal Revenue Service Code. It's IRS Code 42, if you want some quick bedtime reading. You know, in Hawaii, and so we serve basically those at 60% of the area median income and below. And for a family of four, that's roughly $73,000 on Oahu. And we do senior properties as well, and those senior properties are restricted to those at 62 years of age and older. But it's not easy to get into a family property or a senior property developed with tax credits because we have financial liabilities to our investors. And so you really have to jump through a few hoops to get access. And if you look at the LIHTC properties across the nation, it's actually been the strongest program to develop low-income rental housing in the country. In Hawaii, we've been operating in Hawaii since 1996. We operate on all the islands. And I do have good news regarding senior housing. We get our financing through the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, which is a financial arm of DBED, the Department of Business and Economic Development. And we were fortunate just recently to get 2 awards for them. One for a senior property in Aiea, which is going to be 142 units of senior housing out there. And the other one is a senior property in Hilo, which is a 92-unit property for seniors with a preference for veterans and their spouses. These properties don't happen overnight. Because of the large government subsidies involved, it takes years. Hilo in particular has taken over 8 years to develop. And another critical point for what we do is we can't afford to pay for land because of the income levels that we serve. So we really depend on a lot on the counties and the states when they put out requests for proposals on leasehold land. We've been fortunate enough to win a few of those. And what it turns out to be is typically it's a 65-year ground lease with the state or with the county. And we put on it a regulatory agreement which restricts the use for low-income rental housing over that 65-year period. The rents are restricted by HUD. HUD changes the rents on an annual basis. And the rent that HUD puts out includes utilities. So we do have to give utility allowances, which will provide an estimated utility cost, and that is included in the restricted rent level. Most of our properties have long waiting lists. Family properties, the waiting lists can be well over a year. Senior properties, the waiting lists are a little bit shorter for, I think, obvious reasons. But it still is going to take you easily 4 to 6 months or longer to get into a senior property. We also have a lot of seniors living in family properties that we have. We have 2 very large properties in the urban core in downtown Honolulu. One is Kukui Tower. It's right at the corner of Kukui and Nu'uanu. That property is 380 units, built in 1976, and we just completed a major renovation of it in December of last year. The other one is Kukui Gardens, which was formerly owned by the Ching Foundation. They were looking at demolishing that 857-unit property back in 2006 and converting it to market condos and commercial. We worked with the tenant association and were able to convince the state that we needed to preserve at least a portion of that property because you can't recreate affordable housing in the urban core in that amount of density. And so the property was basically split in half. The state provided the funding to buy the Makai portion of Kukui Gardens, which is at the corner of Lila and North King Street. And then we were selected as the property manager and developer for the rehabilitation of the property. And that consists of 389 units. And they're both family properties, and they're constantly running at 98% occupancy. The only reason we have units down is that we're rehabilitating them. We've already selected the next tenant to move in off of our wait list. So the demand for affordable rental housing, I've been doing this for 25 years now, has never been met, I guess, is one way to put it. The demand is huge. It's kind of like if you build it, they will come situation. But again, the problem that we have is it takes us at least 5 or 6 or 7 applications before we find one tenant who's eligible, completely eligible. The biggest reason that we face is bad credit. If you have bad credit, you're just not going to get in. The second largest reason is an eviction on your record. More recently, in the last 3 years, that's going to limit. If you have bad landlord recommendations, if you have a criminal background with a felony or misdemeanors that involve drugs or personal injury, you're also not going to be able to get in. And we also have some housing first units. I know that Connie had to drop off, and actually I have to drop off for another Zoom meeting at 1 o'clock as well. But again, I really want to thank you for the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what we do. We're constantly expanding in the islands. We have 22 properties on three islands currently, getting ready to do our first one in Hilo, as I mentioned. And we never sell anything, so we hope to be here for the next 53 years as well. Thank you again, Lila. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And Jim, thank you for hanging in there. I know that Kevin has to leave at 1 o'clock, and unfortunately Connie had to leave too. But I really appreciate your participation with this seminar. I wish that I was able to live stream it onto Facebook so we could have reached a larger audience. But nevertheless, my colleagues, Doug and Rick, will do their magic and presented this forum on our Facebook account and on our YouTube page, so that it will reach more and more of our people. Thank you very much to all of you. Would you like to, Jim, would you like to make a closing statement?
No, other than I just, thank you all for having me here. This is what we need, is just more provocative discussions about solutions that aren't with people doing the exact same thing. So I really appreciate your attention to that.
Thank you very much, Jim.
If I could
Yes.
just add one statement, we need more funding, and we need the funding at the state level. That's the
Yes.
biggest issue that we experience when it comes to building rental housing. There's never enough funding to do what we need to do. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And let us know if you have any proposed legislation that we can help support. Well, mahalo to all of you who participated. Later today, tomorrow, I don't know when Doug can work his magic, but we'll have the recorded version of the forum up on YouTube and Facebook. Mahalo nui loa to Connie, Jim, Chuck, and to all of a sudden hit a blank with EH Housing. I'm so sorry. Anyway, thank you very much to all of you. Oh, what was his name again, Jim? Kevin Carney, right. Thank you very much. Mahalo to all of you. Malama pono, please take care. Aloha.